like experiments. And in that experiment, we used 10,000 people. So we set the infectiousness to 3%, but here it's at 99%. So we could see, so we could see an actual effect on things, and we can see the functions of the model better. So we'll start off with the number of masks at 0 people. So no one is going to be wearing a mask. And we'll do this with watch a person on, so we can look at or focus on one turtle at a time and see where they've gone. So this line behind them is basically tracking where they've been, and it changes colors when the person changes color as well. So as we can see here, the line started off as green because they were healthy, and then they turned 6, which means they caught the virus, so the line is red. And now they are gray because they recovered from the virus and they are now immune. So in this scenario, we can see that we have now, the virus has now stopped spreading. So we can see that by there only being immune or healthy people, which is gray or green. And in this scenario, we achieved that in 85 days, and there have only been 57 total deaths here. So the next scenario we will look at is with everyone wearing a mask. And this scenario basically shows that it's like a lot safer if everyone just wore a mask to begin with, but it's not very realistic either because not everyone is going to be wearing a mask all the time. So in this scenario, we have the virus has now stopped spreading. So this took us about 59 days, and there have only been 7 total deaths in this whole experiment. And for the next scenario, we will put the number of masks, we will set it to 100 people wearing masks, and we will set both mask effectiveness to, for spreader and receiver, to 10%. And this way we can see how mask effectiveness actually affects people getting infected or the virus spreading out a lot more. And so now, since the virus has died out, or well, basically it stopped spreading, this took us about 65 days, but there have been 74 total deaths. So you can see that is a lot more than in the first scenario where no one wore masks at all, which was only 57 total deaths, and now it's 74. So it's a much bigger difference, and well, basically this shows how it's a lot worse. It's just worse if people wear masks that aren't very effective at all than to have people not wear masks at all.
And the teammates have joined. So Joy, Lisa, and Ambrosia, if you want to jump in here.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm on mute now. Okay, do you want us to start from the beginning or just our slides?
Up to you, but we have a very limited amount of time, so.
Okay, let's start from. So good morning, my name is Joylissa Rodriguez, and I'm the team captain here of Group 46, COVID Vixens. And I'm here today with Saida and Ambrosia. Now, the title of our project is Considerations that Factor into the Speed of COVID Spread by Science Focus Area Epidemiology. Again, my name is Jarlissa. I'm 15 years old and I'm a ninth grader here at Rio Grande High School.
My name is Zaira Medrano, and I'm 15 years old and a ninth grader at Albuquerque High School.
And I'm Ambrosia, and I'm a freshman at Rio Grande. Now, CDC statistics show that as of March 19th of this year, COVID-19 has infected 29.7 million people in the United States. Of those, 529,000 people died. Our model can show signals of effectiveness and show how people get sick, die, or recover and become immune. We expected our model to show that more masks and more effective masks would result in less people dying of COVID. We found to fight the spread of COVID-19, most people should wear masks, and those masks should have a higher effectiveness. For example, masks like N95, KN95, or other tested highly effective masks. Basically, we want everyone to wear masks, and for those masks to have a combined effectiveness of at least 70%. Our model actually shows it would be worse to wear masks with a moderate prevention effectiveness of 40 to 60% than it would be to not wear masks at all, as loss of immunity could lead to repeated infections and the virus becoming endemic rather than dying out. Masks are an effective way to reduce the spread of COVID-19, but the best method to use is to use multiple preventative measures put together, like the Swiss cheese model, which was developed by Ian McKay, shown on the slide. The Swiss cheese model is like saying when you have a virus that spreads so easily, doing just one thing to stay safe really won't be enough. The more things you do, the safer you will be, and each layer of protection that you add will reduce the virus from spreading more and more. As you add each layer, such as social distancing, masks, washing your hands, testing, and getting vaccinated, the amount of protection increases. Our model focuses on masks, but eventually, if we add to our model, it could be used to evaluate the effectiveness of any of these measures or to evaluate a combined effectiveness of multiple measures. For example, combining multiple mitigation measures like the Swiss cheese model does in order to get an overall effectiveness of 70%.
So the basic reproductive number R0 represents the initial rate of spread for a disease where no one is immune and there are no preventative measures being taken, and it depends on the growth rate of an outbreak. So the current estimate for R0 for COVID is considered to be 2.5, as it is shown in this table from CDC. And there have been a lot of estimates of COVID's R0 that are from about 2 to about 6. So we set ours to about 4, which is basically in the middle, but a little bit on the high side. And this number is the number of people an infectious person is expected to infect in our model. So with the R0 set to 4, every one person that is sick would be expected to infect 4 more people with no mitigation measures in place. Go ahead, Joey.
So herd immunity is the natural method for when a virus dies out, like shown here in this diagram from the US Government Accountability Office. Now, we know that we achieve herd immunity when you only have a chance of infecting one other person or less, which would be an R less than 1. And we can get to that point of herd immunity fairly quickly, but that means that a lot of people will get sick, which will cause many people to die. So we want the preventative measures like masks in our model so that as few people die as possible. Now, masks have been found to be effective in preventing the spread of COVID-19. But again, the type of mask determines how effective it is. For example, there's a difference in effectiveness from wearing your homemade mask or wearing a normal surgical mask or wearing the N95 mask or another mask that's proven to be highly effective. Shown here in this image from the Institute of Systems Biology, masks help reduce the droplet spread from your nose and mouth by keeping your own droplets in and by keeping other droplets out.
So the model we started with from netlogoweb.org is the virus alternative visualization model. Using this as a foundation made it easier for us as beginners in coding to understand what the code does and how changing or adding things to the code affects the model itself. We chose this model, We chose this model because it had several things we wanted to use already in it, like the sliders for number of people, infectiousness, diseases, duration of disease, the ability to watch a person, which is a special feature on our model, and the chance to recover from the virus. It also has a setup of people-shaped turtles, which are color-coded to see who is sick, healthy, or immune. The green ones are the healthy ones, the red ones are the sick ones, and the gray are immune.
Now we added a few things to get the model to where it was how you saw it. So we added things like the circle shapes so that you could tell who was wearing a mask and who wasn't. And we decreased the chance to recover from its 95% to the 75%. And we added some sliders like the immunity duration, which is how long you're immune from the virus after getting infected and then recovering. The number of masks, which is how many people are wearing a mask. The mask effectiveness receiver, which is how effective the mask is at preventing the virus from coming inside the mask, and the mask effectiveness spreader, which is how effective the mask is at preventing the virus from escaping the mask.
So wearing masks changes the chance that someone gets infected with COVID-19 in our model. And the lines of code which cause that to happen in our model are lines 136 through 151. And these are the equations for how the model knows to infect. And for the spreader to infect, beginning at line 139, we can see how we let the infectiousness of the spreader to be the infectiousness that the slider for infectiousness is set to, which is basically just the infectiousness of the disease, or the chance per day that a person will make someone else sick if they are in the same square. So then at line 140, if they are wearing a mask, it reduces their chance of infecting others by setting a spreader infectiousness to the infectiousness of the disease, and then multiplying that by 1 and minus the mask effectiveness of the spreader, and then divided by 100. For the receiver to be infected, it is very similar. It's a very similar procedure for the code. And for both equations, for spreader and receiver, we subtract from 1 in order to determine what amount of the infectiousness is being let through the mask. And we divide by 100 as we are converting a percentage from our slider variable. So we set up an experiment to show the virus without any mitigation. And we set people to 10,000, then set the infectiousness to 3%, and assigned 0 people wearing masks. And then we ran the experiment 10 times with behavior space. And we imported the results to Google Sheets so we could create some charts to help us interpret them. And our results all started with a rate of spread that was close to 4. So this verified it was reasonable to set the infectiousness at 3% to mimic COVID-19 in the real world when we run the model. So if you look at the first chart on the left, it shows with the red line that on the second day of the experiment, there were already 10 people sick and there was 1 new infection. So the 1 new infection to 10 current infections for that day, and scaling that up for the length of the illness, which is 14 days, means we estimate the row for day 2, it is 1.4. So we did this for several days over the course of the experiment. And as you can see with the red line, this number fluctuates a lot. So we also made a line that averaged over 15 days for 7 days before and after, which is about 1 illness period. So the average as we near 0 days, looking at the blue line, is between 3.9 and 4, which means on this experiment, the R0 is between 3.9 and 4. The chart in the middle looks at the highest number of people getting sick after 30 days, with a pattern similar to the first, with an R naught of 4.2. And the third chart on the right looks at the lowest amount of people getting sick, and we again got very similar results with an R naught of 3.6. So taken together with all three graphs showing similar findings within our expected range of about 4, the results of these 3 experiments do verify our decision to set infectiousness at 3% because it has a similar rho, or in other words, rate of spread, to COVID-19 in the real world.
Once we verified the row, we added in masks, and we had everyone wear masks and had the effectiveness go from 0 to 100% in the 10% increments for the receivers and for the spreaders. So we did 10 iterations for each combination of the experiment for a total of 121 scenarios and 1,210 runs to see all the possible pairs. Now, we were hoping to run some runs on the supercomputer since behavior space does parallel computing, and supercomputing has so many CPU cores that we could do it way more individual runs way faster. But here we can see that the blue chart shows that the point where the mask effectiveness for spreaders that really impacts survival is between 50 and 70%. And the red chart also shows the point where the receiver mask effectiveness that impacts the survival is also between 50 and 70%, like with the spreaders.
So we also charted how mask effectiveness of spreaders and receivers interacted in this experiment. And these charts show combined data for effectiveness of both spreader and receiver masks using this equation on the bottom, which calculates the probability that the masks will work to prevent infection, either the spreaders or the receivers or both. But this average line chart didn't make sense to us, so we looked at the individual runs in a scattered chart. And in this chart, we can easily see that after about 40% mask effectiveness, there can be 2 different scenarios. So either the virus dies out completely as a result of having effective masks, or people keep getting sick because they are losing their immunity, then they get reinfected and the virus just never dies out. And the second scenario shows it would be even worse if we never reach the 70 to 75% effectiveness or better. So after looking at results for mask effectiveness, we wanted to see what the model would show about the effect of more or less people wearing masks. And the results we got show the importance of having enough people, essentially everyone, actually wearing their masks in order to reach a level of protection where the loss of immunity doesn't begin the cycle all over again, which would result in even more deaths from the virus. So even if 90% of people wear a mask, the last 10% has a big impact as more people die over time. And if you look at the chart on the right, you can see a point where the line dips even lower, much lower than if no one wore a mask at all.
Now, there were some things we weren't able to add into our model because of the time frame and having to learn the code in the first place in the beginning of the year, like the ability for people to lose or to keep or lose their immunity after a certain period of time so that we could make our model more realistic by making immunity loss more random, like how it is in the real world. We could also include the effect of vaccinations on the disease, and now that we're getting more data from the research on vaccines. And really, we would have just liked to add any other extra precautions from the Swiss cheese model, like testing, social distancing, but we ran out of time. Now, there's another thing is that no one wears their mask 100% of the time. Like, people wear theirs or take theirs off at different times for whatever reasons. So having people always or never wear masks isn't that realistic.
Before we end, we wanted to say thank you to our scientist, Jack Ingalls, for finding computers for us to use and run behavior space on. We are thankful for the original model from netlogoweb.org, the virus alternative visualization model. Since we just learned to code back in January, we would not have been able to complete this project without that foundation. we've learned so much this year from when we started in the beginning of the year. None of us knew anything about coding, so we've definitely came a long way and made a lot of progress. And lastly, we wanted to thank our nonprofit Justice Code for arranging a digital meeting for us to work together each week, even during the pandemic. And that'll open it up for questions.
Judges, questions?
Nice job adapting to a technical thing and scrambling, and really nicely done of adapting. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, I second that. Very nice job of clear presentation, even in spite of the complications. And I think you may have benefited by already collaborating virtually. So maybe that helped you, but that's good. I'm interested in you talked about limitations and next steps. Have you thought any about sort of the super spreader concepts and where different people may actually be infectious to other people in different ways? And then of course we're learning more and more about what we call long COVID, so that there isn't just immunity or recovery, but there are other sorts of aspects. And have you thought any about how that might fit into your code and what you might do there?
I think that it goes along with our limitations and future work, as Joy was explaining earlier. There are some things we did think about. We, at one point, Joy was saying, like financial stuff, like some people can't afford the certain masks, and we were thinking of other world issues that can go along with getting masks or going along with COVID. But as she said, we were limited on time and we barely learned coding in January. We were just trying to get the stuff that we really knew the most about down first. So there's definitely things we want to add and look more into. And I don't know if you want to add on the question.
Yeah, and now that the virus, like, there's still so many things we don't know, and there's so many things changing every day about how you can infect someone, how someone could be not sick but still infect people, and that we would just have to look over stuff and think what we think we could benefit by putting in our model.
Yeah, we could definitely do more research on that and look at the different opportunities and options.
That's an excellent response, and I would just remind you that this is how science works. We're never really done, and so you've made some nice simplifications to start, and so continuing to think about this is a real opportunity, and it applies to COVID, but it applies to all sorts of other medical issues and human interaction issues too. I would argue it applies to lots of economic sorts of things, of logistics, and you've learned a lot, and so be ready to move on from there. Thank you.
Yeah, we were, just like to add really quick, we were thinking about, like I said, financial stuff and like other problems, or even some people take the virus more hard if you have asthma or just other health considerations. And we were all thinking, like, how do we put this in one? But we definitely ran out of time. But I still want to look into stuff like that even after today.
Judges, any other questions? Thank you, ladies. Great job.